Welcome, everyone, to today's information session for nurses who have been selected for Quality Assurance Assessment Part B. My name is Dina Vaidhiraj, and I'm a registered nurse, and I'm also one of the advanced practice consultants at the College of Nurses of Ontario. And I'm joined today by some of my colleagues who you'll hear from shortly. But I wanted to take a moment first to thank you for making the time to tune into this webinar. We appreciate that it's a busy time for everyone, and we want to thank you for your commitment to client safety and your ongoing professional development. So, our discussion today is divided into two sections. The first section is for all selected members, RNs, RPNs, and NPs. We will begin by providing a brief overview of QA's current program and then provide an overview of the QA assessment activities. We will also discuss the coaching support available to you, and you will have an opportunity to learn more about coaching from one of our peer coaches. The last part of this webinar only applies to nurse practitioners, so RNs and RPNs can log off at this time. The College of Nurses of Ontario, as you know, is the governing body for registered nurses, registered practical nurses, and nurse practitioners in Ontario. The purpose of the college is to protect the public by promoting safe nursing practice. We do this by establishing requirements for entry to practice into the profession, creating and promoting practice standards. These are the minimum requirements and expectations of nursing practice, enforcing standards of practice and conduct, and we also administer CNO's Quality Assurance Program. So, what is the purpose of CNO's QA program? The Regulated Health Professions Act, RHPA, and associated health professions acts set out the governing framework for the regulated health professions in Ontario. It requires CNO to establish and administer a quality assurance program that assists nurses in maintaining competence and continually evaluating their practice. All practicing nurses registered with CNO in the general and extended classes are expected to participate in the QA program. So, nurses maintain and enhance their competence through daily practice reflection, lifelong learning, and by integrating that learning into their practice. As practicing nurses, QA is integral to ensuring the public receives safe, quality, and ethical care. Every year, CNO randomly selects nurses to participate in QA assessment, which is designed to allow nurses to demonstrate their knowledge, skill, and judgment of practice standards. There are two parts to QA assessment, Part A and B. All of you watching this webinar were randomly selected to participate in this year's QA assessment, Part B. A notification letter explaining your selection and the assessment activities was sent to each of you. We'll take a closer look at each of the components. Part A is for nurses selected for Part A, are required to review learning modules which focus on understanding the standards of practice and nursing accountabilities, and for completing short knowledge checklists and an attestation of having completed the QA assessment and learning plan requirements. Again, those of you on this call today are only selected to complete Part B and are not required to complete Part A. With regards to QA assessment Part B requirements, nurses selected for this are required to complete two activities, the learning plan and a code of conduct practice activity. NPs have an additional requirement to complete an NP case example to reflect their extended scope of practice. The submission deadline for all activities is noted in your selection letter. You have 6 weeks from the date you received notification of your QA requirements to complete your activities, unless you've been granted an extension or a deferral. We'll speak more to this process shortly. The instructions you need to complete your learning plan can be found on page 4 of your QA assessment guide, which you'll find in your folder on SharePoint. You will also see that all of the required activities, including the QA assessment template, which contains the learning plan, has been uploaded to your SharePoint folder. You are required to submit 2 learning goals and ensure that all the fields are filled out completely before you submit it to CNO. We also encourage you to review the evaluation criteria before you submit. This can be found on page 8 of the guide. If you have any specific questions about the learning plan, you can contact our QA team. The phone number and the email is in your selection letter and will also be provided at the end of this webinar. I'll now turn it over to my colleague Cindy, who will speak about the Code of Conduct practice activity.
Thank you, Dina. Hi, everybody. My name is Cindy Lee, and I'm also a registered nurse and advanced practice consultant at the CNO. The Code of Conduct is a broad and overarching practice standard and is one of the practice standards to which all nurses are accountable to and are expected to uphold. It articulates what people of the public in Ontario can expect from nurses and sets the bar for those in the nursing profession. All nurses selected for QA assessment will be required to complete the Code of Conduct practice activity. This activity gives you an opportunity to demonstrate that you understand the principles outlined in the code and that you apply them into your practice. Everyone, this includes RPNs, RNs, and NPs, are required to submit 2 examples that demonstrate 2 different principles of the Code of Conduct. And we recognize that nursing practice is very diverse. So while some principles may reflect one role that involves direct patient care, other principles can be easily demonstrated in other nursing roles. The Code of Conduct applies to all nurses regardless of where you work or what your role looks like. Now we'll talk about the requirements for the Code of Conduct activity. The Code of Conduct consists of 6 principles. Under each principle are a set of statements, and here is an example of the first principle in the code. Nurses respect clients' dignity. Start by reviewing each of the 6 principles and select the one that best reflects your day-to-day practice. So think of an interaction, an experience, or an event from your practice and where you demonstrated that principle. Your example does not need to cover every statement that falls under the principle, but it should be about at least one of those statements. For example, you might select principle 1 and provide a specific example from your practice where you treated your clients with respect, empathy, and compassion. Here are some key things to remember about your Code of Conduct submission. We want you to provide 1 example per principle, and your example should be an interaction, experience, or event that relates to your practice. We want you to provide enough detail so that the peer coach that's reading your submission can determine that you understand and have demonstrated your understanding of the principle and that it applies to your practice. So make sure you review the Code of Conduct practice activity examples that are provided in the resources. The next slide will show you where to access these examples and the other resources to help with your submission. The example you provide must be from your own practice. Remember to use words like I or my statements, and do not provide a hypothetical situation. In other words, don't talk about what you would do, talk about what you did do. And again, review your example before you submit and make sure that it fits under the correct principle and that it meets the submission criteria outlined in page 8 of your guide. So we have created a resource page that's specifically for nurses selected to participate in Part B of the QA assessment. On this webpage, there are examples of completed learning plans, Code of Conduct practice activities, and an NP case example as well. You'll also find other helpful information on how to navigate your SharePoint folder. You can find this link in your selection letter and in your QA assessment guide, which is in your SharePoint folder. We strongly recommend that you review the resources and examples on this webpage before you upload your final documents to SharePoint. And to protect our data and your confidential information, CNO has added an additional layer of security in the form of a multi-factor authentication. So all members will all nurses will be required to provide an additional method of authentication to access their file. This is similar to how you would authenticate your bank passwords. And you will be asked to set this up the first time you access your SharePoint folder. You will find instructions on setting this up on the web page that we mentioned in the previous slide. And on the web page, the website is also here on the screen. Once this is set up, each time you access your folder, you will use this chosen method to authenticate your access. And if you have trouble with this process and need assistance between 8:30 and 4:30 p.m., please contact our service desk at 416-963-7500. Guidance and support are available if you require support submitting your documents. Our advanced practice consultants are available throughout the program to provide clarification and guidance on the requirements of the QA activities, as well as information on deferrals and extensions. If you would like to consult with one of us for support or for guidance before the deadline, you can just email the QA program and one of the QA team members will be in touch with you. You can see the email address right on the screen. And once your submission deadline has passed and you have submitted your QA assessment activities, CNO will assign a peer coach to review and assess your submission. You will have an option to book a coaching session after you have submitted your submissions. Janet Montague, who is a registered nurse, will now speak about her role as a peer coach with CNO, as well as provide some more information about coaching support and what this looks like.
Hello, everyone. My name is Janet Montague, and I have been a peer coach with CNO for 13 years. My role as a peer coach is to review and assess your QA activities and provide feedback. This includes the learning plan and the code of conduct practice activities. Peer coaches who are nurse practitioners will be matched with nurse practitioner nurses and will also review and assess the nurse practitioner case example. After reviewing your activities, I will complete a peer coach report for you, which outlines the results of your activities and provides feedback. My completed report will include my assessment, that is, if your activities are satisfactory, or I may recommend that you make revisions to your assessment. I may also recommend that you participate in optional coaching to assist you with resubmitting your activities satisfactorily. My completed reports are presented to the QA committee, which is the Quality Assurance Committee. You might be wondering, what is the benefit of coaching and why should I do it? As previously mentioned, coaching support with a peer coach is available after you have submitted your activities and have received your peer coach report with feedback. Coaching is optional and is available to provide support to nurses who have been directed by QAC to resubmit their activities. Coaching is also available to those nurses who have successfully exited the program but just want additional feedback on their submissions. Coaching sessions are virtual and can be booked directly with your peer coach. My experience as a peer coach was very positive and rewarding. It was good to connect and collaborate with the nurses on a personal level in finding out what would be most helpful or important to them during the coaching sessions, so that by the end of the session, they could feel more confident with the resubmissions. Some of the feedback that I have received from nurses who participated in the coaching sessions were that the sessions were very helpful in clarifying what they needed to work on and to resubmit. They did not feel alone in the QA process. They felt confident in revising and resubmitting by the due date. They were more aware of the resources or activities that they could use to help them in achieving their goals, and they were very grateful and appreciative of the support. One nurse stated that she was so happy that she had decided to do the coaching session. We evaluated our QA program, and findings showed that members who participated in coaching had very positive experiences and would recommend it to others. Coaching really helps provide that extra support, guidance, and clarity needed to complete the QA activities while demonstrating application of the standards in practice. Thank you, and I will pass it back to Cindy to talk about extensions and deferrals.
Thank you, Janet, for providing the overview on the peer coach role and coaching support. As we mentioned earlier, if you have any exceptional circumstances, you may be able to delay your participation in QA assessment. Extensions are granted based on a nurse's unique situation, and the team can grant up to a 9-week extension. To request an extension, please contact the QA program. For any extensions requests greater than 9 weeks or a request to defer from the program, you must complete and submit a request for extension or deferral form and provide submitting documentations to the Quality Assurance Committee. The committee will then review your submissions and decide if you can delay your participation. To request a deferral or extension, send an email to the QA program and we'll send you the form and any additional instructions. There is more information about extensions and deferrals on page 7 of your QA guide. So to summarize, please review your QA assessment guide along with the resources mentioned in this presentation. Again, the deadline for all of your submissions is noted in your selection letter, unless you have been granted an extension or a deferral. If you have any questions or need support, please contact the QA program at qaassessment@cnomail.org, or you can call us at the number that you see on the screen here. And that concludes the first portion of our presentation. We do have a few additional slides that apply to NPs only. So if you are an RN or an RPN, you may want to exit the webinar right now. Dina will now provide some information about the NP-specific assessment.
Thanks so much, Cindy. So in addition to the learning plan and code of conduct practice activity, NPs selected for QA assessment Part B will be required to provide a case example from their clinical practice. The NP case example tool is based on the Nurse Practitioner Practice Standard, which describes the accountabilities specific to nurse practitioners in Ontario. The purpose of this activity is to provide NPs with an opportunity to demonstrate how their clinical practice aligns with the nurse practitioner standard. The NP standard has 6 standard statements with accompanying indicators. For the purpose of this case example activity, the focus is only on health assessment, diagnosis, therapeutic management, and collaboration, consultation, and referral. The case example tool includes embedded questions within each section to allow the NP to demonstrate clinical reasoning and reflection. Not every section of the tool will apply to every NP's case example, therefore not applicable is permitted. Your submission will be evaluated by a peer coach who is also an NP. Please note that this case example assessment is not a test of your clinical knowledge because we recognize that NPs have a wide range of expertise across diverse practice settings. This tool is a tool that allows an NP to demonstrate how their clinical practice aligns with the nurse practitioner standard. However, remember that the peer coach should see the application of the NP standard in your case example. For example, advanced health assessment, ordering tests, diagnosis, engagement with the patient, and evidence-based practice should all be demonstrated in your example. The peer coach should also be able to follow your rationale and clinical reasoning throughout. There are also examples of completed NP case examples on our hidden link webpage, which was referred to earlier, that you can review. Links to examples can also be found on page 3 of your NP case example tool completion guide and page 5 of your QA assessment guide. We do encourage you to review these examples to help you understand these expectations. So this concludes our presentation today. Again, if you require further support, please don't hesitate to contact the QA team at the email and phone number on the screen. Thank you so much for your time.